Program director from KINK, Jeff Douglas. Wow. You needed to be a part of this.
It's hard to believe it's been 42 years.
I know, that first day that you put KINK on the air and now to this, it's all digital, everything is completely shiny, there's nothing being held up by tape dispensers. It's a different KINK, isn't it?
It was much more humble in those days. First of all, when we went on the air, there were only 2 employees. I'm not sure how many you got now, but a lot more than 2. And we were in, the whole studio was probably, and everything was probably twice the size of the little room we're in
Oh,
now.
that's fantastic.
It was tiny. But people forget back in those days that very few people actually had FM radios. It wasn't anywhere near what it is today. And we weren't in the cars hardly at all, which is why we called ourselves in those days FM 102, because there were really dials.
Yeah.
And, there weren't any 101.9 on
That's
the dial.
right.
So that's close enough, 102. Of course, now, the digital age, everything's precise.
What was it like putting together the first KINK library? What process? Did you bring stuff from home? Did you go out and buy it?
A surprising amount of it came out of my personal library when we started. And of course, it was all records in those days, which some of your listeners will remember. But the record company that really stepped up to the plate, it's an interesting story, was Electra Records at that time. They heard what we were going to do and came up and sent a representative with their entire catalog, everything they had in their catalog going back to
So
the
that would
beginning.
have been the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, Jackson
Well, it's actually
Brown.
pre-Eagles, pre-Jackson Brown, but it was all the Doors and that kind of stuff. But there were a lot of singer-songwriters in their stable at that time.
So Jeff, you have lived through so many of the incarnations of KINK and so many of the predictions that radio is dead, radio is going to die. When cards came along, radio is going to die, and then when the iPod came along, radio is going to die. Do you think radio will ever die?
No. I'm old enough to remember when they say radio was going to die when television came into being. And, of course, it didn't die. It changed. Radio keeps changing, but no, it won't die. And I think it'll still, for many, many years, still be broadcast, not just on the Internet, too.
Did you, were you at KINK when Les Sarnoff started?
Yes.
Okay, talk about the early days of Les. Talk about the first couple of air shifts for Les Sarnoff.
Well, he was doing the evenings then, not the mornings. And he took over for Scott Carter, who was the guy who began Lights Out. And I should say that Lights Out was one of my first mistakes, because I thought Scott was crazy. He said, I'm going to do this show called Lights Out. And I said, it's designed to put people to sleep. This will never work. And, of course, it worked. But Les came in to follow it, and he didn't really know what he was doing. And he was starting to get calls from listeners, no, you're supposed to do this. And so that's what I remember is Les trying to figure it out when he first came on, replacing Scott.
You guys had a great tone back then, and it was different from the FM style. Was that a conscious choice?
It was. I really didn't like the FM style at that day, that artificially laid back.
Kind of high.
I didn't really go for that. And of course, AM stations at that time were very,
Hand on the ear,
hand on
right?
the ear and talking
Yeah.
over the records and very fast. And didn't like that either. So we tried to go just with the style that you really still have today, which is just talking like normal people.
Consider that.
Wait a minute.
What a concept.
Just communicate like regular human
That's
beings.
right. Yeah.
What was the reception like from the musical community back when KINK first hit the air?
It was fabulous, and we were immediately successful, which even I didn't anticipate. I mean, in the very first book, as you say in the industry, that came out in the spring, we were in the middle of the pack. Which there's 2 guys running an FM station, and we're somewhere in the middle of the ratings and the highest rated FM station in town. I mean, it was like, whoa.
Okay,
What is
so
this?
you're obviously a visionary and you're a programmer. So you see the landscape that we have today. What is next for the next thing?
Boy, I don't know what the next thing is. I wish I did. I mean, I have started a lot of things, some of which have worked, some of which haven't. But it's hard to. It's moving so fast now. You know, in those days, it didn't move anywhere near as quickly as it's moving now. So it's very hard to see what's coming next. But I've got enough experience to know that things keep coming around. And so some of the things you think, well, that's over and done with.
Might be back.
They come back. Exactly.
Jeff, it's so good to spend time with you again.
KINK's very first program director, Jeff Douglas. Do you still get recognized as being from KINK?
I get recognized. My voice gets recognized more than once a month, probably every couple of weeks. I'll be in a grocery line or something, and somebody will stop me and say, I still remember you from KINK, and how much those days meant to them. In fact, when we were on the air in those days, we didn't really understand the kind of relationship we were developing with our listeners, but we would get letters from people who moved away from Portland, and they would say, you know, I kind of miss my friends, but boy, I miss your radio station.
Well, you know, that continues today,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Yes, so your
and that-
legacy lives on, and we will do our best to live up to it.
And that was very rewarding to get that kind of connection with your listeners.